Hi there, it's Simon Lewis here. Last week, I gave a day's notice to school leaders that I would be hosting a webinar on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock to go through what my school was planning on doing for distance learning. What I didn't expect was over 400 principals and school leaders to arrive on a Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock, and we spent 2.5 hours going through any questions and offering whatever kind of experiences we'd all share together. Um, Obviously, I don't expect people to watch back over a 2.5 hour video, so I've tried to condense those 2.5 hours into 6 simple rules that every school leader might need, or every single teacher might need to think about if they're going to try out distance learning. Now, I'm not someone who's very comfortable in front of a lens, but I believe these kind of videos tend to have some happy music, so I believe, what do you do? I can't click my fingers, that's why I have to make the sound. Let's do it. 6 rules for distance learning for primary schools. Okay, rule number 1 is take a breath. Up until 2 weeks ago, we were just going about our business, teaching away, and we knew this was coming. We knew something was coming, but I don't think anybody realised how overwhelming it was going to be for the entire world, including us. And as school leaders and as teachers, I don't think we realised how. I don't think we could have realised how quickly this was all going to happen, and while it was all happening and while everything was going on, within the first 24 hours of being told we weren't in school, I must have had 100 emails from companies offering me free access to this, free trials of this, free everything, this. And it was just overwhelming. And I just found myself unable to be able to process all this. And not only that, process the fact that I was probably not going to be seeing my family. I wasn't going to be seeing the children in my school. I wasn't going to be able to see my staff in my school. I wasn't going to be able to go out and do my everyday sort of things. It was, I'm very lucky that I don't have any family at the moment that are ill, but the prospect of that coming, all of that can take its toll, and did take its toll on everybody. And just remember, we've only been out of school for less than 2 weeks, and even if you've done nothing right now, that's okay. We have to remember, we've had to give ourselves the space to be able to get through this processing. But in my opinion, now I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a philosopher or anything like that, but I think if what we need to do before we do anything is to take a breath and to realise, okay, this is what it is, and then only then can we move on to thinking about school. So that is my first rule, and it was my first rule this seminar, was just take a breath. Rule number 2, to reassure your community. And this is particularly true of school leaders, but also of teachers who have a community themselves. Everybody has their community, no matter what their job is. I don't know if this is useful to anyone outside of the teaching world, but I'm coming about it from school leaders' point of view. And school leaders tend to have a community that includes their staff, their pupils, and their families that come to the school. They're the people that we have to reassure. We have people that come to us outside agencies, but really my first job, I felt, was to reassure my school community of that I was there, and to make sure that they were okay, and that I was okay, I was on their side, and I was doing whatever I could to help them out. This was after I'd taken my breath, of course. So what I did, I'm just a couple of things I did, and you'll do your own thing. And I think at this point most schools have done step 2. For my staff, we have a staff WhatsApp group, and that became a kind of a support group, really, in a way, over the last couple of weeks, with people sharing their thoughts, sharing their feelings, sharing jokes, making light of. Sometimes humour is a good tonic for these kind of situations. But I also set up a broadcast WhatsApp group for the staff, which wouldn't get lost in all the chatter. And I felt that's been quite useful, just to let them know, look, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And it was a one-way group where people come back to see that information. And another thing we did was we had a virtual staff meeting once we'd figured out what we were going to do. Now, we didn't do that immediately. Maybe in hindsight, if I look back, maybe a staff check-in online through video or something like that might have been welcomed. I'm not quite sure, but it's something that might be useful. For our families and our pupils, the one thing I'm really glad I did, and I did very quickly, was I held a whole school assembly online. The first time I did it, I used something called Facebook Live, because I'm on Facebook, and we had about 60 odd families that showed up at that, and I just spoke to them, and what I wanted to do really, and that was to reassure them that everything that school would still be here, It may be different, but mainly the main thing that we were important, we have a school motto in our school, which is happy, safe, learn, and that all I cared about right now was the happy and safe part, keeping well, keeping safe, keeping as happy as possible, and the learning might come after. And that's what we would do, but the learning couldn't happen until we made sure that we were all safe and we were all feeling okay. Just seeing people's faces using video, Facebook Live in this case, was very, very good. And since then, we've had a couple of whole school assemblies on a Friday at 11, and we now know that the community are assured that every Friday at 11 o'clock I will be there to address them using a web link. Using Zoom is what I'm using, but lots of other things are available too. So that's my second piece of advice: to reassure your community in whatever way you can before you do anything else. Rule number 3, do nothing new. And I'm putting in brackets, almost. And what I say by do nothing new is there was a bit of a rush, and there was a kind of perception there had to be a rush to embrace all these online platforms to be able to teach, whether that was Google Classroom, whether that was Seesaw, whether that was Class Dojo, whether that was whatever, Aladdin, whatever it was. The thing was, people were rushing to find a way, how can we teach, how can we teach, how can we teach? And the thing is, that's, for me, I thought, look, I think it's actually better not to do anything new. If you don't have access to Google Classroom, or you don't have access to Class Dojo, or you don't have access to Seesaw or any of those things, that's okay. And my rule, if I can give you rules, is not to start something new, because while your staff may be able to cope with a new with a bit of training and something like Google Classroom, your parents and your families will have to learn that new thing. And if this is something that they're not used to, it's already an overwhelming time for parents. It's an already overwhelming time for families. And then asking them to learn a whole new platform might be something difficult. It may be very difficult for your staff as well, who may be looking after sick relatives. I think the best thing to do, and this is what we did, I'm not saying it's the right thing, is whatever people were using at the time, that's what you should stick with. And in my school, we were lucky that we've been using Google Classroom for a couple of years, so most of the classes from first class upwards are using that. But I asked them not to do anything particularly new apart from that. Most of our infant teachers were using Class Dojo for communication, and again, I said, don't do anything new, just use the same process, and that might be enough. And that's my suggestion. If you just have access to email, use email. If you have access to text messages and a website, text your parents to say the website's been updated with some suggested activities. The thing is, you shouldn't be in a position where you have to learn something very, very new. And this is where my brackets, the almost, comes in, and that's coming in rule number 4. Rule number 4, embrace video. When I said this is the almost thing, the one thing I sort of said was, I think video has been a game changer in my school. It doesn't replace teaching in any way, shape or form properly, but what it does is something that I didn't really, I suppose, expect. I'd heard about, but I hadn't expected. Now, there's an adage out there that if technology can replace a teacher, then it probably should, and it never can. And we have to know that. And video teaching is not going to replace real teaching, and we know that. However, the one thing that video did do that I'd heard about but didn't expect it to do so well was this sort of idea that psychologically, when you're looking at someone on a screen, your brain believes you're actually with that person. Your brain subconsciously thinks that you're actually in the room with that person. And I found with our couple of assemblies and our staff meetings and our kind of meetings on video that we've been having, it actually did feel like I was in the room. And it was actually, I remember my first assembly, it was quite an emotional experience because I hadn't seen the children for about a week. I hadn't seen any families for that long. And seeing them on the screen, just, it gave me that psychological connection. So if you do nothing else, and nothing else new, and I suggest you do nothing else new, it would be to embrace some sort of video platform. Whether if you're in a small school, that might be Skype, or if you're in a bigger school, it might be Google Hangouts or Zoom, or I think there's other video platforms out there that are very good. If you do nothing else, try and think about embracing video in some way. Honestly, it's the one thing that I've picked up on in this really weird time, that it does give you that little personal connection that might be missing from our world at the moment. Give it a try. That's what I'd suggest. Rule number 5, the 5 cues to try and keep. And don't beat yourself up if you can't keep any of them. That's my advice. Basically, the 5 Qs we all know as teachers are when, what, who, how, and why, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly. I think if you're a teacher, these are the things you need to let your community know, because we're going to embrace some form of learning, and these are the things that you just need to do. When are you going to put up your lessons online? Tell your families. Maybe that's the evening before, maybe it's the start of the week, maybe it's just less regular than that, depending what you can do. But just let people know. What platform are you going to be using? What platform are you going to use? Whether are you going to be using Google Classroom, or are you going to be using email? Are you going to be using text? Or are you even going to phone people? There's loads of different platforms you can use. They don't necessarily have to be online or offline. You may even post stuff out to people. Who are the staff that families are going to be hearing from? It's not just you as a teacher, possibly. You may get sick and someone else may have to step in for you. You may have a support teacher that generally works with your class. You may have an SNA in your classroom that may work with your class. You need to tell the parents and families who they may see during that time. That's important too. How will families contact you? Maybe they'll need to contact you. Maybe they'll have questions. How are they going to do that? And when are you going to be available to answer those questions? Maybe you'll be able to give them an email address if you don't have an email address. Maybe a temporary one at that. So it could be just your name at whatever.com just for that time, and you can close that off when this is all over. And I suppose the final question really is why, and why should we be doing this? And that's a question that people are asking themselves: why should we be doing this? And to be honest with you, in my opinion, it's because it's what we do. We're teachers, and we need, I feel it's still a vocational job in many ways, otherwise I probably wouldn't do it. And we need to find a way, and I feel we need to find a way to teach when we can, whilst looking after ourselves. I think the children do miss us. I've noticed from 2 assemblies as of so far, and I see their faces. They do miss us. The joy on their faces when they see their teacher on the because a lot of our teachers have come onto the assemblies. They're so happy to see them, and I've got loads of notes from parents saying how happy they are. So why do we do it? I suppose because we're teachers, and that's why we do it. And I suppose that's why we'll try our best to do that while we can. And you know what? If we can't do it because we're sick, or because we're looking after someone who's sick, or because something else happens, look, that's okay, and we have to accept that. And I think this is the time for forgiveness for everybody, and being comfortable, and not being apologising for times where we can't be there. Sometimes we might be overwhelmed, and maybe that's what we just have to realise. But there are my 5 Qs. When we're going to put this stuff up, what platform we're going to be using, who are the staff that people are going to be hearing from, how will families contact you, and why do we do it? Because we're teachers. And rule number 6, the final one, and it really links in with rule number 5, and it's however. We have to accept all of this is pretty much out of our control. We don't know what's going to happen from day to day. I often joke in my job that I'm always 1 second away from complete disaster. And in principles, and most school leaders would embrace and understand that you don't know what's going to happen from day to day, and this certainly is one of the biggest things that has probably ever happened within our jobs. You have to accept that that potentially you may get sick as a teacher or a school leader, and you won't be able to continue your job, and put in place what needs to be done if that's the case. You have to accept that you probably have family who may get ill. You at least have, many of you will have families that you have to look after, just the young children, older relatives, all that sort of stuff, and that's going to take some time. We also have to accept that we are probably going to be dealing with a critical incident during this time whenever it happens. It's very, very likely that someone, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, is going to get into such where there may be a critical incident in your school for the very first time, possibly. And we have to accept all this out of control. We have to accept at some point we may not be able to do our jobs anymore because it is out of our control and we may be redeployed. But once we accept that this is the way it is, we just can only do what we can do for now. And we have to be now and accept that while it's all out of our control at the moment, at some point in the future, we'll get back to normal and we'll get back to teaching, we'll get back to school leading. And that's all we can do. Right, that is it. They are my 6 rules for distance learning. I hope they were helpful. I'm really, really uncomfortable in front of a camera, but I hope that it helped you out in some way. That was 2.5 hours condensed into less than 15 minutes of video. I will be answering any of the questions that I got at the webinar on short videos, things around what to do if you don't hear from families, what about families who are in trouble, what do you do in those cases, what about teachers who aren't able to do some of the things that you'd like them to be able to do. Hopefully they'll help. They are my 6 rules. I think my 15 minutes is almost up, so I better go. Thanks so much for watching, and if you need anything, just simply ask a question in the comments, send me an email, simon@onshaw.net or simon@carloeducatetogether.ie. You'll find me, and I look forward to talking to you then. All the best. Bye bye. I can't click my fingers to turn this off.